You cannot reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth! We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall never surrender!
When I was at university, I had a poster of Winston Churchill on my wall. I'm not embarrassed to admit it. I'd grown up on the standard British mythology, the bulldog spirit, the cigar, the speeches, the man who stood alone against the darkness when everyone else was looking away. My dad admired him so much. My history books admired him. I admired him for his stance against Nazi Germany. I still do. But it took years of proper reading of Bengal, of Kenya, of the deliberate starvation policies and the racial contempt that ran through his thinking like a fault line to arrive at the more honest version. The man who saved liberal Europe was simultaneously one of the architects of immense suffering elsewhere. History is rarely permitted to be simple, even about its heroes. And anyone who still has that poster on their wall without reckoning with that is worshipping a mythology and not a man. I say all this as context for what Donald Trump did last month. Standing in the Oval Office beside a bust of Churchill, he pointed at it and announced for the third time that week that Keir Starmer is no Winston Churchill. He meant it as a devastating put-down. Although he won't, he probably should read more carefully. Because the one thing Churchill is remembered for above all others is that when powerful voices on all sides were urging Britain to accommodate an aggressive, domineering power rather than risk the consequences of standing firm, Churchill refused. He looked at the demand to fall in line, weighed the pressure to just say yes, and said no. Now let's be clear about Iran. It is a despotic, theocratic regime that brutalizes its own people and has been a malign actor in international affairs for decades. None of what follows is a defense of Tehran. But Starmer looked at a demand to commit British forces to a war of choice without a legal basis, without a coherent strategy, without a credible plan for what came after, and said no. He absorbed the pressure. He took all of the insults. Badenoch and Farage crying cowardice before quickly changing their tune after sensing the public mood. No longer Trump's besties, it seems. Britain is often called America's poodle, as was Tony Blair for following Bush into Iraq. Starmer has displayed far more bulldog spirit in his refusal to do the same. Every major European ally has reached the same conclusion. Trump is of course furious that no one will follow him, and his response is to point at the man history remembers for refusing to be bullied into someone else's catastrophic agenda, and use him as a weapon against the leaders doing exactly that. There's one further detail worth savouring. Trump delivered this Churchill tribute while meeting the Irish Prime Minister. For an Irishman, Churchill is a rather more complicated figure. As Secretary of State for War, he sent the Black and Tans into Ireland, a paramilitary force that became notorious for burning towns and murdering civilians in the fight to suppress Irish independence. Pointing at a Churchill bust to make a point about courage to an Irish Prime Minister is roughly equivalent to brandishing a Cromwell portrait to make a point about religious tolerance. It only works if you've never actually read the history behind the decoration. I know something about that poster. It took me a long time to look behind it to find the real Churchill, complicated and human and far more interesting than the myth. Donald Trump is still staring at the poster. He just hasn't realised yet that that's all it is.